Now, before we get started in today's video, I want to make one thing known. You should always be comfortable enough in your own company to sit and have a drink. And what we're going to talk about in today's video, I feel will go some distance to bridging that gap, getting you comfortable in your own company. The first thing that I want to talk about is a flip on the principle called Hanlon's razor. Now, Hanlon's razor, for those of you that don't know, says that you should never attribute to malice what can be accurately explained by stupidity. The flip that I want to bring into play for the sake of today's video is to never attribute to malice what can be accurately explained by people just trying to be happy. Now, a lot of the time when we have disagreements with other people and we feel wronged by someone else, we consider that these people have intentionally hurt us. We look at them from a perspective of which we feel they meant to do us harm. What I want you to think about is how true this actually is a lot of the time. Now, it's very easy for us to fall into this train of thought that whenever someone does anything that we are the victim of, that they have intentionally wronged us. What I want you to consider is that no one comes into this life with a rule book of rights and wrongs and do this, do not do that. We are all just trying to find our way around our existence. And in doing so, we frequently will make mistakes that other people are unfortunately the recipients of, on the wrong side of. It's very easy for us to feel vindicated and hurt by others' actions and sort of take a victimised stance. And it's totally understandable as to why we do this. If someone does something that hurts you, you feel wronged. For your own sake, it is important to at least consider that people often don't mean to hurt us. Now, I have a fantastic example of this that I want to bring into play just to make you understand that I understand. I split up with my girlfriend, or my girlfriend split up with me, about a year ago now, just over a year ago. And I spent quite a long time after that fact feeling upset, but more so angry. I felt hurt. We all feel hurt whenever we get broken up with. And it came to me a few months after that this person had never intended to hurt me. She didn't set out to bring about pain in my life. She just wanted to be happy on her own behalf. Once I realised that she wasn't trying to hurt me, I felt much better about myself, and I felt much more prepared to move forward into what is now a much happier place. But all of the time that I held on to this idea that I had been wronged and hurt, and that I should be in opposition to this person, I didn't afford myself the chance to heal. Now, it's very easy for us to latch on and hold on to these negative emotions because they're comforting in our times of despair. If you feel as though you can channel your upset through a funnel of anger, that really does help a lot of the time. It makes us feel as though we are addressing the emotion at hand. And we are, but we're doing it in a very toxic way. I noticed that the entire time of which I was hell-bent on making this person hurt or hoping that I could hurt them in some way, I was just hurting myself. I was just making it harder and harder for me to come to terms with the fact that what I didn't want to happen had happened. Now, it took me a long time to realise this, and I would urge that you provide yourself with a bit of some leeway on this, because it's very difficult for us to look at someone who has hurt us from an empathetic perspective. It doesn't come naturally to a lot of us because why would it? They've hurt us. They don't deserve our kindness. But I want you to keep in mind that it's not necessarily for that person. A lot of the time, it's for you. Now, we have all found ourselves in a position where we've had to make a hard decision, oftentimes something like a breakup. And in this very moment, the thought that seems to plague our minds is, I don't want to hurt the other person. We all understand that feeling of knowing that for our own sake, we really should be elsewhere. But maybe we stay longer because we don't want to hurt someone, or we find a way desperately to ensure that we let someone down slowly. This in itself should be an indication of the fact that 9 times out of 10, humans don't intend to hurt each other. We don't intend to inflict pain, almost invariably. Particularly on a scale of person-to-person basis like this, it's very rare that people actually want to hurt one another. And I think it's important for us to flip the perspective when it comes to us being the ones that have been hurt and put ourselves on the other side of it. Remember a time where you didn't want to hurt someone and you still hurt that person, but it was within all of your intention to ease that pain and try and not hurt that person, because you know that sometimes our decisions for our own good will hurt someone else. And it's an important point for us to remember that at our core, we are selfish creatures. We want the best for us, and that's not a bad thing. At our core, we want to preserve. We are self-preservation masters. And part of that means that we will encounter situations where someone else has to pay the price for our efforts to heal ourselves. This will, at one point or another in your lives, be you that pays that price. And all the time that you can remember that this is a situation that you will find yourself in at some point, that provides you with the empathy that will push you forward in a far more positive way than it otherwise would if you stuck to that negative feeling, that compulsion to be aggressive. And this leads me on to what I feel is a particularly important point when it comes to animosity in general. I think when people want to improve and just generally develop themselves, we can often come at this with a sort of chip on the shoulder element where we feel as though there's a point to prove and there's someone to say, haha, look what I did, look what you don't have. Case in point, Exhibit A is the villain arc that often occurs when you go through a breakup. How often is that propelled forward by you wanting to show someone what they've missed? This is a potent fuel. A lot of the time we can get a lot done when we use hatred or animosity or that chip on the shoulder as our fuel to push us forward. In actual fact, we have to learn to get rid of this feeling. The longer that you decide to fuel your efforts with the toxic fuel that is hatred and animosity, the less likely you are to actually be happy. Now, you might find yourself completing and achieving a lot of things, but you're not working within the parameters of good spirit. You're working essentially for someone else. You're no longer looking and thinking, I'm going to do this because it's good for me. You're thinking, I'm going to do this to show you. And that's not a good feeling. Now, this recently occurred to me when I decided that an old friend of mine and I should have a conversation about why we were no longer friends. Now, we sort of drifted apart over a few years, and this came to a head at a point where I decided that I just didn't want to talk to this person anymore because I was hurt. And years later, as in what is now about 2 weeks ago, I decided that this person should know how I felt, because we never actually spoke about why it was that he and I stopped talking. Quick drink break. So I decided to send him a text. I decided to tell him exactly why it was that I didn't want to be his friend anymore. Now, in doing this, I wasn't doing anything for his sake. I was doing this entirely for my sake. I wanted to be rid of that feeling of animosity that had continued to be that chip on my shoulder. I realised that I was finding myself in more and more positions where that negative voice in my head that tells me I'm insufficient was fueled by this fervent desire to just constantly make that point known that, oh, I'm getting one up on this person. If I was ever not doing work, the initial thought that would come into my mind is, all the while you're not doing work, you're not proving this person wrong. You're not telling them exactly what you wanted to tell them. And I realised that this was not conducive to success. I realised that I was unhappy thinking this way. I was getting a lot done, but I wasn't happy with any of it. It just was not working for me anymore to feel as though I had to prove this person wrong. And in actual fact, I didn't have to prove this person wrong because they had no idea what I was doing. So I was just shouting into the void of my own soul in many respects. I think it's very easy for us to feel as though we can't let go of these negative fuels that have brought us to a better place, because we feel as though the strong-arming, hard perspective is one that is inherently strong, and that if we decide to be kind and forgiving, that we are being weak. Kindness, unfortunately, to the mind of the hustler or the hard worker is weakness. And this is wrong. It's not true at all. And I can speak from experience in saying that there absolutely is a way to still have that same desire to improve and work forward, but do so from a positive angle. And it's absolutely critical that we learn to do this, because a point that I will continue to shout from the rooftops is that the only reason anyone decides to do anything is because they want to be happy at some point. Now, this is case in point when it comes to improvement, because you want your life to improve. You want your quality of existence to enhance. Now, that's not going to happen all the time that you feel you're only as good as your output and you're only as good as proving someone else wrong. There's a directly negative connotation attached to this train of thought, and it's one that you need to abolish immediately. Do not fall into the trap of feeling as though you cannot work hard and work well all the while being kind. Or as well, another point, something that I'm absolutely tackling myself at the moment, is feeling as though love will make you weak. I notice at the moment I'm sort of struggling with the idea of, if I was to be in a relationship, I would feel loved. And if I feel loved, then maybe I won't have that same hunger to work. Now, this is one that I'm going to have to speak from a more sort of hypothetical perspective, because it's something I'm working with myself. But it's still worth talking about, just because it's helpful for us to just think about things sometimes. It might spark an idea in your head. If you can't be loved and still do the right things, you're not actually improving yourself as such. We know at some point in our lives that we are going to be in a state of love. We're going to be in a family or a sort of a new family, a married family. And if we can't learn to love and succeed on both fronts, then we're condemned to a sorry existence. I noticed that this sort of fear of getting into a position where you're cared for is directly linked to, if I don't have that feeling of insufficiency, I won't have the impetus to improve. Because at the core of self-development is this sort of feeling of insufficiency. It is essentially saying that what you currently are is not enough. Now, this is a problem that I think is difficult to navigate, because I think everyone should commit themselves to improving. But inherently, it is saying to yourself that there are things you need to do to be better than you are. And sort of the precursor to that is that in being better this way, you'll be more loved, or you'll be more valued. If we attach ourselves so much to this point that we can't work unless we're the underdog, then we are going to at some point feel very insufficient. Sort of in the way that we have tried to feel more than and fill that void, we're just going to make that chasm much deeper later down the line. I think it's very important for us to realise that hatred as a fuel is something that we need to learn to control. It absolutely is valuable in the short term for getting you to a point. If you are someone who is sick and tired of being bullied or being mistreated or just yourself and you want to change, then this negative feeling is absolutely valuable. But on the long term, it's something that you can't continue to rob yourself of having, or you can't continue to rob yourself of love and care, and voicing that to other people as well. I think all the while we can reduce the amount of tension and stress and pain in our lives, we should. And I think there's this sort of idea in the self-improvement world that hustle has to be dark. And I can tell you now it doesn't. It doesn't have to be dark. The next point that I would like to make and look into is one of confidence. Now, I find that with some people, I am charismatic, funny, intelligent, my points are quick and sharp, and with other people, I'm like the definition of Aspergic. It's almost as though Asperger's as a syndrome was developed when someone looked at me in a conversation. And I have frequently beaten myself up about this thought, and I know that people do this. I know a lot of people think, for fuck's sake, why am I so... why is this person so poised to laugh, as Sam Harris puts it? And then the other person, it's like, I'm incapable of providing any humorous element to my conversation. We beat ourselves up, forgetting the fact that there is a common denominator here that is in our favour. Some people absolutely make us less comfortable. Now, this is most of the time not intentional, it's just the energy of someone just doesn't seem to work with you. And as a result of this, we can come away from these experiences thinking, why could I not just be myself around this person? And we feel as though it's our fault. It's something that we have done wrong. But you are in both of those situations, and the other person who makes you uncomfortable is only in one of them. So do you not think it's more likely that actually it's the energy and the presence of that person that is responsible for your change rather than you? I think coming to this realisation was something that really helped me sort of cut myself the required slack for just not beating myself up about situations where I'm uncomfortable, rather than feeling, why can I not just talk to this person like I talk to my friends? I could go into that conversation with a predetermined expectation that this is just someone I'm not so comfortable around, and that's okay. Don't worry about that. We can catastrophize on this point, and it's not something we need to catastrophize over. It's something that we need to become aware of ourselves on and just cut ourselves that slack. I think it's really important for us to cut ourselves some slack when it comes to socializing with people, because it is hard. And particularly some people, you're just, for whatever reason, it's just harder for you to connect with your true self. And all the while we ridicule ourselves, we rob ourselves of the ability to bridge that gap. I think when you realise that this is something you do, it's then something that you can sort of account for. And in accounting for it, I would argue you put in the work that is required of one of you to make this no longer an issue. I noticed that with me, someone who I'm inherently uncomfortable with, I now don't try to be the same person in some sense. I try to be more considered in my thought, and as a result of that, I get closer to the version of me that I want. I notice that the version of me that I wish to portray is one that is fluid and loose and comfortable, but it seems as though in order to get to that state, I need to be more reserved and fill the room out and see what's going on, and then I can be comfortable. And I think a lot of people do this. I think a lot of people are have the ability to be comfortable with everyone, but it takes them some time to warm up. So give yourself some time to warm up. Now, in line with the theme of today's video, I also want to talk about the fact that we need to be aware of our minds having a negative bias when it comes to introspection. It's very easy for us to take a negative stance on ourselves no matter what we do. I am subject A, exhibit A, when it comes to this, and a lot of people are. A lot of people find it very difficult to provide themselves with any sense of positive praise, just praise. I think a lot of people can't help but be negative towards themselves, and we wonder why we do this. And just to get a little bit technical, I think it comes down to an evolutionary bias towards safety. I think man is sort of inherently pessimistic because pessimism is more safe than optimism. If you were looking at a lion in your pack when you were a groin cloth, easy for me to say, wearing, spear-wielding caveman, when you walk towards a lion, it makes more sense for you to go, I don't know what that is, so I'm not going to go near it, then go, I don't know what that is, so I'm going to go and say hello. The point here is the mind is biased towards pessimism, and I think that sort of the downstream of that, we have this sort of leaning towards everything. I suppose if you're someone who is forward thinking, this comes with ideas that are full of possibilities, and in possibility there is uncertainty, which boils back to this point that what you're uncertain of makes more sense to be deemed a threat, which is why then we come to think of ourselves in a negative mindset. We look and think, you can't do that because you've never done that before. Don't do that. Trust me, don't do that. You can't do that. We fuel this narrative because it makes sense on an evolutionary scale for keeping us safe. It's important on this point to remember that we are no longer a caveman. And on that, we need to learn to just know that we have this bias. I absolutely believe that the more you know these things happen, the easier it is to address them. I think social media and YouTube and gurus and people sat in front of microphones talking about stuff will quite often try and sell a panacea. They'll try and sell something that you can do. Now, while this works, I think it sort of bypasses one critical aspect, and that's understanding what it is that you're doing. I think the minute that we can be honest with ourselves and go, yeah, for whatever reason, I am just inherently negative towards myself. I think the minute that we can do that, then your brain starts working out, what can I do to change that? Is this something I want to change? Yeah, all right, what can I do here then? I think your brain will do you a lot of favours the minute you just start to recognise that this is something that you do. Now, this in turn leads me to a point that I would like to make aware, and this is that all the time you endeavour to try and address your issues, you open up the possibility, or in fact the inevitability, that your brain will step in and start trying to do you some favours. I think we vastly underestimate the power of our brains when it comes to just figuring things out. I have noticed that for the years that I've decided to put myself towards a good cause, I have found myself frequently just figuring things out. It hasn't come in a textbook, and it hasn't come from one eureka moment. It's just sort of gradually been embedded into the psyche that, you just seem to have this sort of bias towards negativity. What can we do about that? I think the point that I want to sort of make salient there is, over time, you do tend to figure it out. We have a miraculous way of just figuring it out. And this sort of ties into my points, the aforementioned points here in today's video. Just keep trying to do these things and it will eventually stick. I think a lot of the time we get demoralised and disheartened by our efforts because they don't immediately work. Now, I can speak from experience far more than maybe I would like to, that when you just try, eventually it seems to stick. It won't work straight away, but just going forwards with the right energy seems to work at some point or another. And what I would like to sort of attach to that is that if you just keep trying to get better, you keep trying to work towards something, then it will eventually work. You just have to be consistent. And I think consistency is something that is actually much easier than people think it is. If you put yourself forth every day to try and improve yourself on one front, all the time that is your North Star, it is something you're doing. Even when you're making mistakes, you've still got your eye on the fact that you know what you've done today as a mistake is something you want to avoid. And it's only a matter of time, in my opinion, in my experience, that you will break through at some point. You will break through. There comes a point where you just seem to, something snaps and you just think, I'm not doing this anymore. I've told myself so many times I want a cleaner diet. I don't want to watch that anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be someone who lies anymore. And eventually you do it so many times that you just break through to this new ground upon which your dreams are answered. Your efforts are found. To encapsulate today's video, because I am on my own, unfortunately, today. No, not unfortunately. What did we say at the start of this video? Anyone, what did we say at the start of the video? You should be comfortable enough. I deem this a good segue to have a drink on your own. As of this point, I'm going to start adding one of these videos in each week. And with these videos, I want to bring forth a few things that I've been thinking about over the week that I think will be useful for people to consider. Now, for that, if you have anything that you want to have addressed, or you want me to discuss with someone, or discuss on here, or look into and bring onto here for the sake of other people, drop that in the comments and let me know, because that is essentially what I want to do with this. As for going forth with the channel, I want to do 2 podcasts a week with guests and one that's more like this, because I think I just think that's a nice little format. And with that, there are 2 keys that I want to add to each of these videos. One is an activity to try, and another is a video to watch. So the activity that I want you to try for the next week, until the next video this comes out, is to do a 2-minute plank every morning. Now, this will seem somewhat insignificant, but when you do it, it will start to open you up to more positive things that we will get onto as these videos progress and as we work towards better versions of ourselves. The video that I would like people to look into, and just because I think it's interesting, and I think actually it ties in quite a lot of what we've said today, is Free Will by Sam Harris. Now, it's a debate, or not a debate, rather, it's a speech, and it's about an hour long, but you'll fly through it. It's really great. And on that point, if you love that video, which you will, get the book by Sam Harris called Free Will. It's wonderful. It will really change the way that you think about things. And I would like, just on this point, to mention that even if you disagree with the idea of determinism, that this is a very valuable way of perceiving other people when it comes to protecting yourself and having a more enjoyable existence. So with that being said, I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Thank you very much for your time as always. I have an untold amount of love for anyone who is listening to this video. See you later, chaps. See you later, chapulettes, ladies, gentlemen, androids, androidettes, all the rest of it. See you in a bit.